about the author. Christine discovered long distance backpacking while surfing the internet at work. Are you supposed to be surfing the internet at work? Come on.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
So my guest today is Christine Reed, and Christine is the author of Alone in Wonderland, a story about backpacking. And I must say, before I turn the microphone over to Christine, when Mackenzie said, hey, we should have her on as a guest, she hiked the Wonderland Trail. And I'm like, what's that? I was literally like, what's that? She goes, it's around Mount Rainier. I'm like, oh, well, my bad. So, Christine, I'm asking you to enlighten me about the Wonderland Trail in this episode, but I'd like, just for a second, go ahead and introduce yourself to our guests and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm Christine. I recently wrote a book, but before that, I was just like a military brat kid growing up in the world, doing school and normal stuff. Okay. And my family wasn't super outdoorsy. I wasn't raised doing any like hiking or like camping trips and things like that. And in my early 20s, I kind of just got to a point where I realized I wasn't really happy with my life and I needed to try something new. And backpacking presented itself to me. Thank you, Internet. And I discovered the Appalachian Trail was actually my key in. And I hiked 650 miles of the AT in 2015. And then after that, sort of went off on this exploration of just figuring out who I was and what I wanted and using the outdoors as a tool in that and finding my relationship with the world. And then in 2018, I kind of stumbled upon the Wonderland Trail myself. And I had heard about it a little bit from the hiking community. But I happened to find myself in Mount Rainier and I crossed a sign for it. And it triggered that like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And I Googled it and a 93-mile trail. And I thought, I'm going to just do that. I'm just going to see if I can get a permit and hop on. And I got on the trail the next week.
So did you know that the trail was, because I did, okay, even though I didn't know anything about the trail, I did a little bit of research, not a lot, but it's certainly not a flat trail. So it had some elevation gains throughout it. So were you aware of that before you strapped on the boots and went going, or were you as naive as I am about this thing?
I was pretty naive.
Okay.
I Googled it and I saw that it was 93 miles and I had done the 650 miles of
Right.
AT before. And so I was like, cool. That sounds great.
I got this. Yeah.
No big deal. And it wasn't until I was on the trail that I heard somebody say there's 22,000 feet of gain and loss on the Wonderland Trail. And I was like, oh, no wonder this is so hard.
All right. Well, we're gonna get to that a little bit, but I want to go back because I'm reading something on your website right now, and I'm reading it straight from your website about the author. Christine discovered long distance backpacking while surfing the internet at work. Are you supposed to be surfing the internet at work? Come on. I love that. I was like, well, when I wasn't working, I was finding out what to do.
Just in my free time, I was clicking on clickbaity articles.
Okay. Well, was that what it was? Is that kind of how it happened? Was it kind of a clickbait type title that got you going? What was it?
Oh gosh, I don't remember exactly how I clicked. I was just kind of surfing around to different things. And I clicked on something, clicked on the next thing, clicked on the next thing. And then I found myself on this really old school blog forum called White Blaze. That I don't know if it even still exists, but it was kind of the old bulletin board format where people would ask questions and then other people would answer. And then there was blogs. And I just, found these questions, people saying, what's the best way to dehydrate spaghetti sauce for the AT? And I was like, this is fascinating. There was just this whole world of information and culture and people doing something together and coming together on the internet in such an interesting way to share information about something that I had no idea existed. And I found it fascinating.
All right. So, well, no, this is interesting to me. This is very interesting. So you're on an old school forum. people are talking about dehydrating spaghetti sauce. First off, that's funny to me. I don't know why. I just think that's kind of funny. And you hadn't really done any hiking before. You didn't just go out and put a bunch of miles on the Appalachian Trail, did you? Or did you?
Not exactly.
Okay, so you did a little prep.
Yeah, I had about a year between the time that I discovered the AT and that I set foot on the AT. And in the meantime between those things, I did a week of volunteer work on the Appalachian Trail with the Conservancy building trail.
Okay.
Because I wanted to see the trail. There was something about like physically seeing it. That was kind of my deciding point. So I had found out about it and was pretty sure I wanted to do it. So I volunteered with the ATC and went to see the trail. And that was my like, yes, I definitely want to do this. And then my lease was going to be up where I was living in Arkansas. And so there was this period of time between about 6 months between when I wanted to start the trail and when my lease was going to be up. And instead of wanting to sign a 6-month lease, plus I really wanted to quit my job. And so I Googled jobs that provide housing. And the first thing that came up was national parks. And so I was like, oh, that's perfect. I'll be able to hike. I'll like meet cool outdoorsy backpacking people. And then it'll like bridge that time. And then I can like work some crappy minimum wage, like grocery store job in the national park. So I got a job in Yosemite for 6 months, and I didn't do almost any hiking at all while I was there. It was over the winter, and all the summer employees were kind of leaving when I got there in August. And I made some amazing friends and like hung out in the outdoorsy community, but I didn't do very much hiking at all. So I think the preparation I did for the AT, while it was a year, and I researched gear and I figured out how to do food, and I like, I read a lot and I learned a lot, and I did a lot of mental preparation. Not any physical preparation.
Oh, okay. Well, so did food prep include dehydrating spaghetti sauce? I mean,
it did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna break my rules. Let's talk about that trail just a little bit more. Where did you start on the trail, and where did you end up at?
So the southern terminus of the AT is at Springer Mountain in Georgia.
Okay.
So I started there. I actually started on the approach trail. There's like an 8-mile approach trail to the start of the trail because it's at the top of a mountain. So
okay.
There's great debate about whether they should just include the approach trail in the official trail, but at this time it's not.
Okay.
So I started there, and I hiked 650 miles north to Parisburg, Virginia.
And how long did that take you?
70 days.
Wow. Okay.
That includes like 0 days off, trail days, festival, things like that.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to abruptly shift over here to the Wonderland.
Sweet.
93 miles. Should have been easy for you. I'm kidding because of just how many miles you just walked on the other trail. Let's just start. Where did you get on the trail at to start?
So there's several places you can start the Wonderland Trail because it's a circle. And I started at Mowich Lake. If you're familiar with Mount Rainier National Park, you may never have heard of that because it's kind of obscure. So there's like Longmire and I always get it wrong. Sunrise. Thank you. And then Paradise.
Right. And
so those are kind of the 3 places that people know. And then Mowich Lake is sort of like, off on the side, and you have to go through this tiny little town and then drive 10 miles out a dirt road to get to Mowich Lake.
Okay. So somebody dropped you off because you didn't leave your car there. I
did leave my car there.
Oh, you did leave there. Okay.
Yes, because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. They have a big parking lot and you can leave your car there.
Okay. Why did you pick there to start?
I got a walk-up permit. So the permitting system for the Wonderland is really competitive, and they only give out about 2/3 of the permits via lottery ahead of the season. And so then there's like 1/3 of the permit spaces or the camping spaces available for walk-ups. And people don't do walk-ups very often because it's a big commitment to like take the time off and be available to hike and then maybe or maybe not get a permit.
Right.
And so they're actually easier to get than you might think.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I walked up and I just said, I want to hike the trail, the whole trail, and like I can go any direction. I can start at any place. I'm super flexible because that's the best way to get a walk up is just to be open to whatever. And so it just worked out that that's how the campsites were available for me to start from there.
So they assigned, basically, they told you where to start because of the campsites.
Yeah.
Because one of the things in my very limited, now we're just about to exhaust my knowledge of the Wonderland Trail, is that you have to, my understanding is you have to camp in certain spots. You can't just like call it a day at 2:00 in the middle of the forest. You have to continue on to the next campsite space.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the campsites are assigned. So
okay, like
it's, there are like 20 campsites in Mount Rainier National Park, but your permit says you are staying at this site on this day.
And what would happen? I mean, just total squirrel moment, because if you look at me, you can see that I am not a hiker. What would happen if you wanted to deviate? Let's just say you found a part between campsite A and campsite B, and you really wanted to take a little bit more time and just really like, maybe you're a painter and you wanted to paint something. So you're there, blah, blah, blah. What can you do? Are you completely locked into this script?
I don't want to encourage people to break the rules, but sometimes you have to break the rules. And more for if there's safety reasons that you need to not go to where you're going, if you're injured or if the weather or the rivers or something like that, like the park rangers are going to be understanding to those kind of things. But the reason that they have the designated camping sites in Mount Rainier is because the alpine tundra there is really fragile, and like the ecosystem of the plant life and the animals and stuff, like they are managing it the best they can by consolidating our impact as humans in these camping areas. And so like in terms of wanting to do what's right for the park and the space and the animals and the beauty of the space, like you really shouldn't vary from your schedule unless there's like a good reason to.
Well, what if you wanted to stay in a campsite? You're scheduled, once again, campsite B, right? And you're scheduled to be there on Tuesday night, and you're like, I really want to take an extra day here because I want to do something artistic, like paint, like I'm not encouraging anybody to go out and, trample through the forest, but if you wanted to take an extra day, is that an option, or is it super regimented?
It's pretty regimented. And the reason I would say for that is that someone else is probably reserved in that campsite the next day. So if you're there hanging out and then they show up and they're supposed to be camping there, then there's going to be like, and I would like to think that we're all like friendly enough and outdoorsy people, like community enough that someone could come and you'd be like, oh, like, let's just share this campsite. It's plenty big for both of us. But of course that's
might not be the case. Okay.
Could not, yeah.
So how many days did this take you?
I hiked for 11 days.
You hiked for 11 days. So about 8 miles a day on average?
Yep.
Okay. So it doesn't sound too bad.
It was not insane. Yeah. I definitely, when I got my permit, I said, I want to spend as much time as I can out there. I really want to like take it all in. Of course, with a walk-up permit, like the way they kind of finagle you into what campsites are available, sometimes you end up with, I had one day where I hiked 2 miles, and then I had a day where I hiked 14 miles. So it definitely wasn't evenly distributed.
Well, the 2 mile day, if it was really steep, might not be so bad. 14 miles, if it was really steep, would be terrible. So how was the elevation gain? Was it a lot of work?
It was really hard. Yeah. The 14-mile day actually had 3 really steep climbs in it and 2 steep descents between the 3 climbs.
So they worked you that day.
It was a rough day for sure. Probably definitely my hardest. And when you look at an elevation profile of the Wonderland Trail, it's all up and down. There's no flat spots. Like it's not like there's a really steep climb and then you get to like walk flat for a while. It's then you're going straight back down where you came up. So it's pretty rough on the body.
Well, let me pause. Why is it called do you know why it's called the Wonderland Trail and how it came into existence? I guess maybe we should have asked that to begin with. Maybe.
I should know that.
I don't.
I mean, I don't know the exact historical story of how it came to be called the Wonderland Trail, but when you hike it or even just go out for a day on it, like it's obvious why. It's so beautiful out there. The views of Mount Rainier are some of the most epic, and I was out during wildflower season, which made it just like super magical.
Did you take a camera? Did you do?
I actually
She's shaking her head. No, folks.
No, at the time I had been living in a van for a while, and my phone kind of had that, like, my battery's gotten hot too many times and it died immediately. And I just thought I would just enjoy being there.
Okay.
And,
all right. But you missed out on a bunch of wildflower photo ops and mountain shots.
Yes, definitely. But those are available on the internet. So
yes, I'm sure they are. Well, from a takeaway standpoint, what sort of takeaways did you have on the trail that you might not have thought? Did anything, like, and we can talk about the categories in your book, if you will, but what surprised you on the trail besides a grizzly bear or something? I mean, kidding, but was there anything that happened on the trail, maybe, mindset or whatever, that was a surprise to you that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I took away was just the idea that as humans, and then I guess more specifically as backpackers and outdoors people, that we're all experiencing a lot of the same things. I think that we as like individuals like to claim our hardships and our difficulties and our self-doubts and all of those things as like uniquely ours. And backpacking is such a beautiful way to kind of strip away all of our facades and the ways we present ourselves in the world, and to show a bit more of our raw selves. And so in that experience, being around other people who were doing the same thing I was, who were pushing themselves to really difficult physical extremes, and who were like out in the woods with nothing but what they could carry on their back. Like we see each other in more vulnerable ways in that type of environment. And it just allowed me to recognize that like the things that I was really struggling with that kind of drew me onto the trail weren't going to be solved by the trail. They were going to be solved by recognizing that like everyone else is also experiencing those difficulties, and that I don't have to own them and carry them on my shoulders. Like we can share those things. And that's a big reason why I wrote the book, was to share the difficulties that I was experiencing that led me to the trail, and the things I was seeking while I was out there, and the realization that like my pains and difficulties in life are universal. And that talking about them and sharing them with other people and making yourself vulnerable by doing things like backpacking, and also by telling your story about it, that's how you're going to connect with other people and share that load a little bit. Okay.
Well, before we get too much into the book, let's go back to the trail. What were some other takeaways? Like what was like, share with us, if you will. I mean, this is an audio production, but paint a picture for us, if you can, of some of the takeaways that you saw visually on the, what was like magnificent for you that you saw? I mean, Rainier, for those of us that have grown up around it, I think we take it for granted. It's just there. It's always there. Well, I grew up in the Tacoma area, which you may not know where that's, but just north of Rainier, and it's cloudy, so you don't see it every day. It's not like it's there every day, but when the mountain's out, it's the mountain out, and you just kind of go, yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
For you, that was a whole new thing. And if you were in school in Arkansas and in all that, that's a much bigger mountain than anything you were hanging out with before. So what did you see? What was inspiring to you?
Yeah. I'm going to give like a tiny bit of backstory. Kind of my first experience with big mountains was living in Yosemite Valley. And if you've seen photos of the valley, Half Dome and El Cap, and there's just these beautiful, rugged, just kind of strange rock formations that are sort of otherworldly. And there's like a really magical power to them. And after living there, every national park that I've visited since is either like as good as Yosemite or not. And that's a pretty high bar.
Oh, okay.
And
All
so,
right.
I went, then I went on the AT and I went to the Smokies and I was like, yeah, Smokies are okay. So I had this bar in my head of like magnificence and what it was. And when my friend invited me to come meet her in Mount Rainier for a day hike, I was like, oh, it's like a national park that just has one mountain in it. Like, that's probably kind of lame. And I just didn't know. And I got up there, and when I saw it, I thought, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And it has that otherworldly, like, it's an entity of sorts. And when you stand in the presence of Mount Rainier, like close to it, there's gravity there and just such epic power. And there's a reason people talk about it the way they do, and that the mountain being out is like a cultural thing in Washington.
Yeah. It is a thing. You're right. It is. It's a thing.
And I love that. And since writing the book, I've gotten a bit more of Washington culture because I'm participating and interacting with these communities in Washington. And it's such a fun thing. But yeah, walking around it, there are a few things I took away, which is one, like, I'm maybe interested in summiting a big mountain someday, which was not something I had any interest in before.
Okay.
But also, there was something really spectacular about how Mount Rainier stands kind of alone, and you can really, like, the Wonderland Trail is a circle around it. And so you spend almost the whole time with Mount Rainier in view, and you see it from every angle. And I just don't feel like that's an experience we get with something so big and magnificent very often in the world, is to just really see it from every side and know that you've stood all around it and like encircled it.
Okay.
That was a really powerful experience.
All right. So we're going to put you on the spot. What's better? Yosemite? Rainier?
Oh, I definitely think the hiking in Rainier is better.
Way to cover your bases.
I'm also, because I just like think there's just different things about them. And I'm also a rock climber, and I know you can do some climbing in Rainier, but Yosemite is known for its rock climbing. But I actually wrote a little bit about the hiking in Yosemite and about how like unpleasant it is, because everything you hike from the valley in Yosemite is straight up a rock face, essentially. And they've just like chiseled stairs into it. And that is as unpleasant as it sounds.
Yeah, that does not. Can you imagine being the people that are chiseling the stairs into the rock?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that.
It was the Conservation Corps from way back that they set up that stuff. But so I definitely think like Yosemite has a kind of a rugged, rocky, and that is its own type of beauty. But I'm very much drawn to things that are lush and green, and the wildflowers and the rushing rivers, the glacial rivers in Rainier were so powerful and amazing. And like that stuff all really speaks to me.
Okay. Good cover. Well, now you did say that you kind of learning the Washington state language and all that stuff. But before we hit record, I asked you a very important question to me, and well, you didn't answer it right. So you don't
Ask
like
again.
coffees. Well, yeah. What you don't like coffee. You already disclosed that. So that's a Washington state thing. You've got to like. But because I'm not a hiker, help me out and help our listeners out a little bit. How much did you pack in? What sort of stuff did you pack in? What would you have? I mean, you didn't take coffee, which I would have absolutely, my pack would have been, that was,
Nothing but coffee.
I would have gone barefoot if I could have put more coffee in. What did you pack, and how did you manage yourself on the trail while you were out there?
Yeah. So there's three, like I was saying before, Longmire and Sunrise, and now I'm blanking on the other one. Paradise. Thank you. So those three places where there's like a ranger station and kind of touristy things, they have places where you can drop off a food cache. And so I had food caches around the trail. So I only ever had to carry, I think 4 days was the maximum of food. So I picked up food twice. But I am kind of a super minimalist when it comes to hiking food. And I like to keep it really simple because I know what is not going to upset my stomach when I'm out on the trail. Because the last thing you want to do is like have a tummy ache when you're hiking.
Yeah.
So I mostly ate like ramen with dehydrated vegetables, and then oats with freeze-dried like strawberries, bananas. There were wild blueberries while I was on the trail, so I got to like add blueberries and I think huckleberries to my oats, which was great. And then almond butter, and then like granola bars, Lara bars. I'm a big fan of Go Macro.
So it would have gone all so much better with coffee. Just would have. Just saying.
I had like an electrolyte drink mix pre-workout that had a tiny bit of caffeine in it.
That's not the caffeine. It's the taste of. I'll drink decaf. I mean, I really will.
Oh, you just like coffee.
I like coffee. I mean, okay. I will drink decaf. I mean, anyway. So. Well, so did you primarily then just drink water? Was that kind of the beverage of choice?
Yep.
Or are you a tea drinker, or
I've packed tea on backpacking trips, and I usually end up not. It's just too much effort to like do the boiling water. The electrolyte mixes are great. And especially if you're sweating a lot and you're sweating out a lot of your salts, it can get to a point where it's hard to keep drinking water because your body is telling you stop because you've lost a lot of salt. And so those electrolyte drinks, and even things like people do Gatorade mixes or even like Kool-Aid mixes or Country Time lemonade mix, like powder, just something so you can get more liquid in. Can be helpful. Yeah, that's not really my thing, but
coffee. You get more liquid in with coffee.
You can get more liquid in with coffee.
Well, that's kind of cool though. So you were able to have a couple of food caches, so you didn't have to. So how heavy was your pack when you started, approximately? Down to the ounce.
Down to the ounce. Between 35 and 40 pounds with water and food. So base weight maybe in the low 20s. Yeah, so that's not too bad. And carrying 4 days of food is not too bad. I'm getting ready now to hike the Colorado Trail, and our first leg is going to be 7 days. And I'm not even sure how I'm going to fit that much food in my pack. So the Wonderland Trail is set up really nicely that you can break it up and not have to carry too much food at one time.
So what was something you should have packed that you didn't?
Sunscreen.
Oh, so you bought the hype that it rains all the time and it's never sunny here. Gotcha.
So it's actually, that's a funny story because I had sunscreen, and then at the first resupply stop, I left it behind because I talked to somebody else and I was like, yeah, I've just been in the forest the whole time and like, I don't need this sunscreen, do I? And they were like, no, you're good. And then of course the east side of the mountain is completely exposed. And so for the first 4 days, I didn't need it and I dropped it off. And then immediately I regretted that decision.
Okay. All right. If you were to hike the trail again, what would you do differently?
I would start in a different place and maybe go the opposite direction. Because you can go
with the sunscreen to start with.
Yes. And then I could leave it behind after.
Right. There you go. Good know.
I definitely did the trail alone because I was like looking for solitude and that kind of experience. I think it would be something that would be fun to do with a friend. And I actually saw a group out there I just passed them one day, and it was a group of 5 and they were having just like a party time the whole time. And I was definitely jealous. And then later I found out they had filmed a music video while they were out there. I'll see if I can find a link and send it to you.
Yeah, do. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw, I saw this group went and hiked the Wonderland Trail and they filmed this music video, and I watched it and I was like, oh, like I saw those people while I was out there.
I know those folks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how was it? I mean, a woman by herself in the wilderness. Did you have concerns? And if not, if you didn't, why? I mean, that's a terrible statement, really, but I mean, yeah. How do you get your mindset around that?
Yeah. This is a question that I've fielded a lot from women and, from backpackers, from not backpackers. And it is something I talk about in the book, is just the idea of safety and how we're socialized in the world as women to believe that everything is dangerous. And I definitely was raised that way. And backpacking has been sort of a way for me to defy that idea, because I hate the idea that the world is not safe for women, even though it's true in a lot of ways. It's just upsetting to me.
Okay.
But I also, it's finding that balance between recognizing that there are really dangers out there and how to prepare yourself for those dangers. And then also not letting the dangers scare you away from doing things that are good for you and that you want to do. And on my hike on the Wonderland Trail, I was approached by 2 bears. And when I say approach,
it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. Bears are
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and that's one of the questions too. When people talk about those things, I always think, would they be saying this if I was a man? But like, this is a valid danger for all humans.
Yes,
bears,
yes.
and I have had enough experience with the AT and other things talking about black bears, knowing people who've had experiences with black bears, to know that generally speaking, black bears are not super dangerous. And so when I asked the ranger about bears in the park, she told me there had never been a violent bear incident in the history of Mount Rainier National Park. And I thought, oh, we're good.
Wow.
Then. And also I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah,
okay.
But she did say there were some bears that were hanging around at one of the campsites that had been reported a bunch of times, but they were just being nosy. And if you left your backpack out, they would come rummage through your stuff. And so she said, put your stuff away, put your food up where it goes. Like, don't give them any temptation. And so I was prepared for that. And I wasn't worried about it. And I got to that campsite and I did what I was supposed to do. And I got in my tent with the rain fly off so I could see out. But I was reading a book and a marmot ran through my campsite. And then immediately after, 2 bears came chasing it. And they like turned on a dime when they saw me and came up to me instead. So I was like, I was in a tent and like a tiny little backpacking tent. So I was sitting down. I couldn't stand up if I wanted to. And they came up and sort of like flanked me on each side. I could have reached out and touched them with my hands. They were so close.
Okay.
And that is by far the scariest thing that's ever happened to me in the outdoors. And they like looked me in the eyes. I could see their nostrils flaring as they were like sniffing me. And then they just went on their way. And
because you didn't have coffee.
They knew I was coffeeless.
Coffeeless.
But it really scared me a little.
Well, I can only imagine. Were you carrying like bear spray or anything?
I was not.
Okay.
But I also at that range and I was in a tent, like I couldn't have bear sprayed them anyway.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah. So
wow. See, I would have, yeah. No.
It's one of those like, what would you have done? Because I couldn't do anything. I was just, I was like, my heart was beating so fast. I was breathing really hard. And I was like, please just go away. Please just go away. Like, I can't, there's nothing I can do in this situation.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. That's crazy. And then, so they just went on their way. Yeah. And then, of course, I moved my tent after. Why? I mean, just.
I wasn't going to. I wanted to be like a tough guy about it. I was in the campsite. There was a couple girls who were camped at the shelter down below. And I walked down there and I was like, hey, like, if you guys wanted to see some bears, they like just went that way. And they were like, you saw a bear? And I said, 2 bears. And they like came right up to me and they were like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I kind of calmed down a little bit by then. And I was like, yeah. And it was probably only like 6 p.m. It wasn't late. And it was still daylight out. And so they were like, do you want to come bring your tent and camp next to us so we're all together? And I said, no, I think it'll be fine. Like they came, they sniffed me, they saw me, they left. Like they know I'm here now and I'm sure they're not that interested or they would have stayed longer to see what I was up to.
Right.
So I kind of told myself that. And then of course I like go back to the tent, put the rain fly on so I can't see out. And then I'm like reading a book in there and I just like every noise outside my tent. I was like, oh my God, it's bears. Like I couldn't let go of that energy after they had left. So I then did get my tent and moved down by the other girls just so I wasn't alone.
I'm probably going to think of bears tonight when I'm comfortable in my house, thanks to this story. Oh my gosh.
And so, you know, in terms of safety, like the Wonderland Trail is a great medium between being alone and being like, you're at designated campsites. There are other people at those campsites. So even though you can spend the whole day alone if you want to, and you can even go to your particular campsite and not talk to anybody if that's what you want to do. But there are other people pretty close by. So if there's an emergency of sorts, like you're not.
How many people?
alone.
how many unique people, by unique, we're not going to count the same person twice if we can here. How many unique people do you think you ran into during the trail? A lot? Or, just a handful? Or
on the days that I wasn't crossing through one of the main tourist areas, maybe 4 or 5 people a day. So like
okay,
50.
So pretty sparse.
Yeah. And then of course,
sparse.
when you're like hiking in and out of sunrise, like you're going to see 150 people that day. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, but on the trail itself, if you will, the remote part of the trail. So it's,
yeah.
It reads, her rugged outdoors woman persona started as a joke. And I'm looking at a picture of you sitting on a rock, pouring something that's not coffee into a water container. You don't, and I'm looking at you as we're recording this. And rugged's not the word that I would assign there. Not dainty by any means, but rugged is, I wouldn't. How did this come up? It was a joke. So how did this come about?
Yeah. When I moved to Yosemite and I told people that I didn't know and was just meeting that I was going to go hike the Appalachian Trail, I got a lot of like, wow, that's really cool. Like, you're so hardcore. And then I would go do like a short day hike with this person. And then they'd be like, you're really slow and like struggling a lot. And we'd be doing something not that hard. And I'd be like, this is really hard. And they'd be like, this is not that hard. Like, so it was this kind of like, I was telling people I was going to go do something really cool. And so they had this expectation of like who I was and what my abilities were. And then we would get out there to do something together. And they would be like, are you sure you're going to hike the Appalachian Trail? Because it doesn't really seem like you could. And my defense, like, I kind of took on this, like, when someone would question me in that way, I would say, I'm a rugged outdoors woman. What are you talking about?
Okay.
So it became sort of like a jokey defense when I was embarrassing myself in the outdoors and someone was calling me out on my, like, princess, which is a word that is like, I don't think of myself.
Well, you don't come across like that either. You don't. That's not a word I would describe
somewhere in between princess and rugged. There's like a big. Yeah. I'm somewhere in the middle of that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because I'm just, I'm looking at this and I'm like, this photo and looking at you and I'm like, rugged's not the word I would go with.
So rugged. I have actually also like made friends because my Instagram is Rugged Outdoors Women, which stemmed from that joke. And now, because I do all the outdoors things and I post about it, and now I've written a book about backpacking, and like people really do think I am that. I guess it's the same joke it always was. Is like people think that I am more hardcore because of the way that I present myself and the things that I do. But I'm a big believer that you don't have to be good at something to do it.
Okay. I'm looking at a picture on your Instagram. It's your book and a cat. Is that your cat?
No. A reader sent me this photo.
A reader sent you this photo, and the cat's like, "What is this thing doing on me?" Okay.
But I get a lot of dog pictures with my book because people apparently read with their dogs a lot. And that was the first cat picture I got. So I was really excited about it.
Gotcha. Okay. That's all right. Interesting. Any other takeaways from I'm not trying to avoid the book. I'm trying to get to the book in a different direction. So, but you've also, so I'm reading here, is a story about backpacking, but it's also a story about, and then we've got a whole bunch of words. What other takeaways from the trail for you that you want to share with us? What else did you learn about yourself on, is there a nugget you can share that, and then we'll work our way into the book, but what else did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the other main things that has come of this journey, which culminated in the Wonderland Trail, was this idea of feminine independence, and that I needed to be a strong, independent woman and do things alone and know that I didn't need anybody else. And I had been kind of exploring that in the entire time between the Appalachian Trail and the Wonderland Trail. And And part of my story is that my mom died when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail in 2015. So that is something that I was sort of dealing with over the course of this time. And a lot of my actions sort of stemmed from this idea that right before my mom died, I was trying to strike out on my own and figure out who I was and kind of break away from the expectations of my family and not end up like my mom in some, grand scheme of when you're 25 and you want to not be like your mom. And backpacking was a huge part of that for me. It was something my mom would have never done. And it was something that really scared her, that I wanted to do it alone. And when you are in the process of something like that, and then the person whose expectations you're trying to defy is suddenly gone, and it no longer matters whether you defy their expectations to anyone except for yourself. It just brings a lot of things into question in terms of why you're doing things and what you're trying to accomplish. And one of the things that I really left the Wonderland Trail with was the idea that there are like more options in life than trying to either be or not be the person that my mom wanted me to be.
Okay.
And one of the metaphors that I made in the book about Mount Rainier is just that Mount Rainier does stand independent, and she's tall and strong and beautiful in all of these ways. But when you get up close and you're in kind of the foothills of Mount Rainier, you're just around, you realize like there are all these other small mountains around, and there are these rivers coming down, and it's just so intertwined, the whole ecosystem there. And like Mount Rainier could not exist if not for all of the smaller stuff around her.
The whole Cascade Range.
Yeah. And And just this idea of independence, and like, what does independence really mean? And can you ever truly be independent? Like, there is no such thing. We are all on this earth together, in society together. And as much as you want to separate yourself from it, like, you're always beholden to the forces of everyone around you.
So when you started the hike, did you have a book plan, or where did the inspiration for the book? Yeah. Why the book? How's that? Let's put it
I did not have a book planned. I was not a writer before. But I was dealing with all of these questions about who I was and what I was looking for in life. And the experience of hiking the trail, I had so many experiences meeting other people on the trail, having conversations with people. I had a few people ask me why I was hiking, and I had one person ask me very pointedly, "Why are you alone?" And those questions kind of like dug at me in a way that they probably wouldn't have if I wasn't struggling with that question already. And I was really trying to explore those ideas with other people. And there were a few other solo hikers that I talked to about independence and being alone and backpacking by yourself, and like why we do these things. And that's when I realized like a lot of us are having the same experiences, the same doubts, the same fears. And that's what made me want to write the book, because I realized talking to other people and hearing them say the same things that I was feeling made me feel better and less alone. And I thought, I bet there are hundreds and thousands of people out there who are feeling the same things I'm feeling. And if I share my story, it might make them feel less alone.
Oh, absolutely. That's awesome. So on the trail, you started talking to these people. And so the idea of a book started to percolate at that point. See, coffee reference, percolate. Were you journaling, taking notes while you were hiking? I mean, are you a journaler?
I'm not a journaler.
Okay.
I get asked that a lot. I've just never been consistent with stuff like that. But I did, once I realized I wanted to write a book, which was actually the last day on the trail, it all kind of like came to a head. It had been raining all day, and I spent most of the day in my tent reading a book. And I thought, books, I could do that. And so I had my map that they had given me at the ranger station when I got my permit. And so I just wrote like in a little column on the side of the map, like who I met every day, and then like things that I wanted to remember. And so then when I got back from the trail, I got my computer and I started kind of cataloging what all had happened to write from, so I didn't forget anything.
So what I'm noticing, there's a trend here. You used the internet, and then you went on the Appalachian Trail. probably underestimating the scope of what you were trying to accomplish. Then you decide to hike the Wonderland Trail without noticing that, oh, there's 22,000 feet of elevation gain on this thing. And then to top it off, you go, hey, I'm going to write a book because why not? And writing a book is not exactly the easiest thing in the world either. So I applaud you for your selective ignorance, because you're not letting it stop you. You're just like going, I want to do this, and you have done it. So you've done the trail, you've done the Wonderland Trail, you've published a book. Most of us would have stopped ourselves after doing a little bit of research or having a bad day on the trail. I don't have my sunscreen. We would have turned back. I mean, that's just kind of human nature as I observe it. So the book, super easy, right?
Yeah.
Piece of cake, one draft, done, send it off, published it. Yeah.
It's funny because I kind of thought it would be like that. I do have like a bit of a cocky personality in some aspects in terms of like, if I just decide I'm going to do something, I feel very sure I can. And sometimes I underestimate the amount of work it's going to take. There's certain points of no return, I like to say. And on the Wonderland, my point of no return was that I hiked from Mowich Lake down 3,000 feet and then started going uphill. And then on the uphill, I was like, oh my God, this is really hard because downhill's easy. And so then I thought, if I turn around right now, I have to go back up that hill that I just came down. And that really kept me from quitting the first day. Because I definitely considered it. I got down and I was just like, do I like backpacking? I got out there and I thought, oh, I've made a horrible mistake. And a lot of times things are like that at the beginning, right? It's uncomfortable and you haven't adjusted yet to the discomfort.
Right.
Yeah. But the book thing, I definitely thought I'm going to write this book in the next 4 months. I thought I was going to do it in 4 months. That was my imagined timeline.
Okay.
It took about 2 years from like getting off the Wonderland Trail to holding a physical book in my hand was just over 2 years.
So let me pause. Let me ask you something. What was it like when you held the book for the first time?
I imagine it was like giving birth to a baby. I haven't done that and I don't intend to, but I'm claiming this as my giving birth moment.
Were you super excited though? I mean, was it like
yes, a
life moment? One of those memorable moments in your life, like you launched this thing?
Absolutely. Like I worked my butt off for 2 years to do it. And then of course I was like waiting for it to come once I'd ordered the printed copy. And I was just like, 10 days of
the longest 10 days of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a great video of me opening the book for the first time on my Instagram. If you scroll back a bit.
Okay. All right. Was there a lot of screaming and yelling and jumping up and down, or?
I'm not quite so emotive as that, but it was more like.
Okay. All right. So from the rehashing your adventure in the effort of writing the book, what other takeaways did you find out? Like did your thoughts of the hike and the trail change as you were revisiting them over the months that it took you to write the book?
I don't know if my thoughts changed, but I do think I will remember the details of hiking the Wonderland Trail in a way that I do not remember other big things that I've done in my life because of the process of writing and thinking about the conversations I had and thinking about the scenery and describing what I was experiencing. I just feel like that 11 days of my life is like forever ingrained in such minute detail in my memory. And that is a really cool experience. And it's also made me think a little bit more about how I take in and remember things like from that point forward. So now when I go hiking, I'm more observant than I used to be, and I pay more attention to things. And then I also have just very recently started writing sort of like trip reports for backpacking trips and like other outdoorsy things I do. almost so that I can later revisit them and remember the details that I'm going to forget inevitably.
Right.
So I really cherish the object that I have the book so that I can go back and reread it and remember the little things that are going to eventually fade from my memory.
That's very cool. How long has the book been out?
It launched at the end of January, so about 6 months.
And how has it been received?
Really positively. I've been humbled and also like proud and so joyful to have connected with people with it. The overwhelming feedback that I've gotten is this is so relatable. You know,
Well, Kenzie loved it. She absolutely loved reading it. And I was talking to her this morning before we recorded this, and I was saying I was disappointed because I didn't have time before we'd scheduled this because you're getting ready to go on a hike. So we wanted to talk to you now before you went on your next hike. That I wasn't able to get a copy in hand to read it before I was able to talk to you. So I will read the book. I will because I love to read, and I'm intrigued by it because it's in our backyard. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And you're interested to see what lessons and takeaways you've got from it. So that's very cool. On a completely random note, the cover art, who did that and why did you select the cover art like that?
So I went back with a friend the year after I hiked and took photos of my favorite section of the trail. And so the cover came from those photos. And I actually wasn't really sure what I was trying to do with the cover. I self-published the book, so all of the design choices and stuff were mine to make. And I had one graphic design person working on the cover, and they were using that photo, and it was still just a photo, and everything was coming back feeling really like cheesy and like not professional. And then a friend recommended this other artist, and I talked to him a little bit, and actually one of the photos the first artist had done was almost like a little cartoony feeling, but it was still a photo. It was just like so heavily edited. And someone I showed it to get like ideas said, oh, it kind of reminds me of those national park postcards. And I thought, oh, what if it was more like one of those national park postcards? Like, let's lean into that. And so the second artist, who does a lot of vector art, was actually really perfect for the job because this is sort of what he does. And so I said, can you take this photo and just make it like super a lot like a national park postcard in terms of like the style of the art and then the text.
Yeah, it definitely has that retro feel to it, which is cool as far as I'm concerned. So I think it's a cool cover.
Yeah, I was really happy with it. And I think, they say that don't judge a book by its cover, but if you've ever published a book, you know that the cover is really important when it comes to getting your book out in the world.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So you independently published this. Once again, I'm sure that's just gone flawlessly without any challenges. How has that experience been? What have you had to do? And one of the things we want to make sure we talk about is where people can find your book, available. But how's that process been? Now you're not only are you a hiker and an author, now you're a publisher. So you're wearing all these hats.
It's been actually really good. I made the choice to self-publish pretty early on in the process, and I really did weigh my options. I had a few other published authors tell me you should really try to get published from an agency because this book is good enough and you would get picked up if you did some querying. And I just felt like it was something I wanted to do on my own. And I was really interested in the marketing process and also the process of like taking what I thought and my words and making them into a finished product. And, I worked with professional editors. I worked with a professional graphic designer. I worked with a designer for the interior of the book. So it went through all the normal stages that a professionally like big publishing house would go through. But then the marketing And the outreach to bookstores has been kind of an ongoing process since January. I've been reaching out to independent bookstores. I just recently started reaching out to gear shops in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho because I'm going to be planning a book tour there in the spring. So I'm hoping to get the book on shelves at places where people are going to see it and read it and be interested. And then when I come for a book tour, there'll be people who've heard of the book when I get there. Mm-hmm. And some of that outreach has been really great. Like one store in Washington, I sent them an email and I said, hey, like, here's my book. Here's what it's about. Here's why I think you should be interested in it. And they immediately emailed back and said, we'll take 6 copies. And I thought, oh, that was too easy. And some of it's a little more legwork and I've sent emails and then it's like, okay, now should I call these people too? And it's been a lot of research in terms of how to get on podcasts and get, interviewed and how to get into these communities. And I did a live interview with David from Mount Rainier Watch. Mm-hmm. And that was great. And he's got a huge community that's super excited about Mount Rainier and like same thing with you and Mackenzie, like you've got a great community that's really excited about like specifically what I've done. And I think that is a cool thing about doing it myself is I can really target people who are like truly involved in what I'm doing and saying and interested in what I have to offer in a more specific way than I think when you go with a big publishing house, they're kind of just like splattering you all over the world. And it's not as targeted, right? Because they have their channels that they go through. So in some ways I'm able to be more targeted and more specific with who I'm interacting with and who I'm trying to market to. And in some ways, like just the spray method is effective. And they do have connections that I don't have that I'm having to fight through some of that. But,
so if I asked you to summarize the book, how would you summarize the book? Like your 30-second elevator pitch. So you're an author. What's the name of your book? What's it about?
This is the hardest question.
Okay.
I generally tell people it is called Alone in Wonderland. It's a story of my through hike on the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier, but it's also a story about the freedom and the independence that we seek when we go outdoors and the idea of leaving your life behind and reinventing who you are and how the outdoors can be an access point for that.
Oh, okay. That's great. Nicely done. Nicely done. Kenzie mentioned something. You alluded to it, so I'd like to just ask a little bit more about this. So you said you lived in a van for 3 years?
Uh-huh.
What type of van?
I had 2 vans during that time. The first one was a 2003 Dodge Ram van.
Okay.
It was black, stealthy. Had those little accordion curtains on the windows. And then it was a low top, not like the extended. And it was unreliable at best and broke down on me a whole lot. And so eventually I got sick and tired of that. And I bought a 2018 Ford Transit.
So selfishly, let's talk more about that.
Are you a van guy?
Tell me. Okay. So my challenge is I'm almost 6'4". And I am enamored with the idea. Kind of like you searched on the internet for things to do. I searched on the internet for vans. And if my wife hears this, she'll, don't tell anybody. Edie, stop listening now. No, I'm curious. So your new van, is it a taller top? Is it the tallest one or is it the mid one?
So it was, I've sold it now, sad day. But it was the mid height. Okay. I have a friend who's 6'3", and he had, maybe still has, the Dodge ProMaster. And he was able to put in a very thin lining on the roof and still be able to stand up. Right. The thing when you're really tall is like, then you might have to lose like your insulation on the floor and the ceiling, but it can be done.
So yours, was it completely converted out? And so the 3 years that you were living in a van in one location, or were you moving around?
Moving around, yeah.
Okay. And we could go down a whole rabbit hole of conversations about that. did you enjoy it? I mean, 3 years is a long time to do something if you don't enjoy it.
True.
So did you overall, was it an enjoyable experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
One of the things, so I had been living in the van for about only 6 months when I did the Wonderland Trail. And one of the things I talk to people about when they're interested in living in a van, especially if they're going to do it alone, is that it's really easy to isolate yourself. And if you're not a social butterfly and you're not forcing yourself to be in social situations, it gets lonely. And that's one of the reasons I went on the Wonderland Trail, because I was feeling that pain of loneliness and just like, why doesn't anyone want to travel with me? And like, where can I make friends? And it's hard to make friends when you're moving all the time and you live in a van. Like it's really easy to kind of go in your turtle shell, right? You're taking your home everywhere you go, and you can just be in there and it's comfortable. It's your space, and it can become a habit to not put yourself out there, which is funny when you're living such an alternate lifestyle that you think you are constantly putting yourself out there.
Okay. Well, we could go way overboard on that. So we'll abruptly end that, but that's very cool and fascinating to me. So, I normally would ask you, hey, where do you go to get a cup of coffee? But we already know the answer to that is you don't drink coffee. So why don't I ask you this question? Where can people find your book and find out more about you? Yeah. Sure, please. So the
best place to find me is on Instagram at Rugged Outdoorswoman. The best place to buy the book is at aloneinwonderland.com. That is my personal website. If you order just the book from there, it comes with a snazzy bookmark and a sticker. And if you you can also order the Book Plus version, which is a signed copy of the book, and it also comes with a set of photo postcards from when I went and took photos. That are really beautiful. And if you want to support your local bookstore, any bookstore can order the book. I have a distributor, so they can look it up and order it for you if you have a local bookstore you really like. If you want to buy it online, you can do that too, from lots of other places that sell books online. But it won't be with a bookmark and a sticker. And it won't be shipped. Awesome. It won't be shipped from me with love,
Right. From Denver.
Yes, from Denver.
From Denver. Well, thank you. This is, I enjoyed this. This is great to hear about the trail and about you. And is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.